One of Premiere Pro's powerful and useful features is its close integration with other Adobe products, in particular how well it works with Photoshop. You can bring in layered Photoshop documents into Premiere Pro as individual layers, or have all those layers appear inside a sequence. It's a great convenience to do that. Now, if you don't work with Photoshop, this may not make complete sense to you, so let me just show you how it works in Photoshop first. Here we are in Photoshop. We have two images here, two Photoshop documents. This shot of the fish, which you've seen before if you watched a previous tutorial, and then this shot of this document over here. Each of these documents is a layered Photoshop document. The fish has that many layers, 8 layers. I'll show you them one at a time. There's the background layer, this fish layer, another fish layer, on up the line here. Now you won't be able to see the bubbles here, so I'm going to click on the bubbles and then add the background so you can see them. Bubbles again with the background, and bubbles again with the background, like that. So in Photoshop, you can apply effects to individual layers and things like that, but Photoshop is not geared toward animation, at least not that much. But Premiere Pro, of course, is. So you can take this static layered document and bring it into Premiere Pro and animate those individual layers. This one looks a little different because it has layer groups, but there are layers inside these layer groups, and that's what will be imported into Premiere Pro. Open up the bottom, and you've got these various backgrounds. The one on the bottom is currently the active one. This one could replace it. Only difference is the green there. Or this one could replace it. It has a filter on it. Looks like glass. This is the active one, but you can import all three if you want. This is called an adjustment layer, and that won't be imported, but it can change the color. But you can do that inside Premiere anyways. Then you've got this votives layer group. Open that up, and it's actually 3 more layer groups. 2 of them are turned off, so you can't see them. If you open this up, you see there are 2 layers there, but you click that. That's what's inside there. The votives and this white area with a little mask on it. The mask gives it kind of a frame look like that, but that's turned off. But when you import it, these will come in if you choose. There are 2 more groups here. This one similarly has 2 layers to it, text and the purple stuff. This one, the eyeball's on as if you could see it, but inside it, this layer is turned off. It's a vase. But again, you can import this layer when you bring it into Premiere Pro. And finally, this text on top, like that, the subtext and the main text. And they're both turned on. So those are 2 Photoshop layered documents which we're going to bring into Premiere Pro. So now it's time to get to work. Let's go to Premiere Pro. Just double click on the icon to start it up. We'll make a new project, so click on New Project. We'll put it in our favorite place. Go to the desktop. Click on this folder, My Premiere Pro Exercise Files folder, select folder. Give it a name like Photoshop Test, something like that. Click OK. Don't need to have a sequence. And now it's time to import those 2 documents. So go to the project panel and then double click here in this empty space. And that opens up the import dialog box. And go to the Working Files Other Assets folder. You're going to go to this folder, Other Assets. Click on the first one, Layered Doc 1, and then Shift click, Control click, Command click, whatever you do to select another one like that. Now in previous versions of Premiere Pro, there would be a little box here saying, how do you want to open up this Photoshop file? But that's gone because it was redundant, because it would ask you again later, so I'm glad they've dropped that. Now we click Open. And that opens up this dialog box before you actually finish the import process. It asks you, how do you want to bring this one in, this layered doc? You can merge all the layers, in which case you're going to have an image, basically, and all the layers will be merged together. So I'm going to click OK here, and I'm going to go back and get this one later in a different way. So click OK, and now it's going to come in as a one image, a 1-layer image. Now we're taking a look at the second one. So how do you want to bring this one in? Well, we'll look at the other options here. We can merge layers. If you do that, then you pick the layers you want to merge. Or you can say individual layers. In that case, you can select which layers you want to bring in individually. So I'm going to select all of them and click OK. What happens now is that first one comes in as just this Photoshop image. It's a flattened or merged image with all those guys together in one spot. If I were to drop this on to, let's say, a new sequence by pulling it down to the new item icon like that, there it is. It's just one image. If I were to say animate it by going to Effect Controls, clicking on Motion, and the whole thing will move around. Not individual layers, just the whole thing, which is really kind of counterproductive. Why do it this way? That's why we're working with Photoshop, so we can work with individual layers. That one doesn't really help us much. If I go down to this one down here, the layered doc number 2 with the candles and stuff, they're all individual layers. So perhaps I would start by taking this background, the one called All Colors, dragging that to the new item icon to create a new sequence. There's the base, basically. Then we could add things on top of it, like this fading votives, put that on top, for example. And we could add other ones on top of that. This large votives. Can't quite get up there. I need to pull this down. There we go. There we go. Put all three things. Now it's getting a little crowded. So I could click on this one here, for example, and go to motion, and perhaps I want to move it up the page. Or maybe I want to click on the one below it and move it up the page instead by clicking on motion, bringing it up. Click on this one and bringing it down. So that's how you can work with it. It's kind of a manual process. You got to do one layer at a time, and that to me is not the most effective way to bring in a Photoshop document, but perhaps you want to bring in only one or two layers, and that's a pretty good way to do it. But I think the best way to do it is to bring it in as a sequence, and you can select the layers in that sequence anyway. So I'm going to go back here, double click on an empty space, and go back to the first one again. This one I'm going to say, let's bring it in as a sequence. Before I click OK, I can select which layers I want. In this case, I'll take all of them. And click OK. Now that brings it in as a sequence inside this folder here. Open it up, scroll down here, and you see the sequence named after the file right there. If I double click on that to open it, pull this down a little bit, press the backslash key to spread things out. There are all those layers. Now it looks just like that, right? But this one over here is one layer. This one here is all those layers, which means now, for example, let's take a look at this one on top, these bubbles. Turn them off, turn them on. There are the bubbles there. If I want to animate those or do something to those, I can animate just that layer. So I'm going to go to motion, for example. Open that up. Let's say I want to rotate it. If I rotate it, you can see that the rectangle shows up. But I can click on uniform scale and uncheck that. Make the width a little bit larger, like so. Make the height much larger. Now I can, let's say, rotate those guys around like that. Or if I want to apply an effect to just those folks, I could apply, let's say, fast color corrector, for example. And we'll just double click on that to add it. I want to change the color. Pull the color in some other way. Notice the color changing there. I can make it really obvious here by dragging this guy over. Look at that. We're dealing with that individual layer. We can animate this, obviously. We can also animate the rotation. So now we can work with individual layers. And let's say we didn't really want to bring in one of these layers. It's no big deal. You can just click on it and delete it, or just turn off the eyeball. So I think it's much better when working with a Photoshop document to bring in every single layer, bring it into the sequence, and it gives you all these kinds of options. So that's how you bring a layered Photoshop document into Premiere Pro. I think you can see that Photoshop can play an important role in the video production process.